Hello, this is Phillip welcoming you to the 2038th edition of the Enfield Talking Newspaper. Our dateline is the 18th of February 2016. The readers this week are Ali, a new reader, Romany, with Colin on the controls. And Colin's also reading because Caroline is unable to be with us tonight. Unfortunately, she's not very well, so get well soon, Caroline. And John is sunning himself on a cruise ship around the Caribbean, so he's having a lovely time, and he'll be back next month. The items that we'll be reading come from our local newspapers, the Enfield Gazette and Advertiser and the Enfield Independent, and are their copyright. Our title music is Country Rock Polka, composed by Pat Priddy, Fernand Bouillon, Harry Breuer, and performed by Jean-Jacques Perry, and is used with his kind permission. Local stories this week include Services Face Closure and Green Light for Bike Lanes Plan. First of all, some special news items this week. And it's with sadness that we report the death of Muriel Arthur. Muriel was one of our longest-serving volunteers. She coordinated the copying and distribution of the Enfield Talking newspaper for nearly 30 years before she stepped down at the age of 91 in the autumn of 2013. We can't begin to calculate the amount of time that she dedicated to keeping the Talking newspaper on the road, fixing equipment, repairing wallets, and sorting out missing tapes, as well as keeping in touch with all our listeners. Muriel was elected a vice president of our charity in 2014, and she'll be sorely missed by us all. Our thoughts are with her family, especially her son Donald. Muriel's funeral will be at New Southgate Crematorium on Thursday the 25th of February at 12:30. An apology to our listeners who receive our broadcast on memory stick. Last week we weren't able to make a digital recording, which delayed the issue of the memory sticks. These were posted on Monday by me at the post office near my office in Old Street, and it seems that many of you haven't received your memory sticks yet. So I'm very sorry about that, and I'll make sure not to use that post office again. And finally, thank you to everyone who's written or contacted us by telephone with feedback about our new memory sticks. We're in a period of transition, and at present around 1/3 of listeners are receiving the Talking newspaper on memory stick. We hope to stop tape production in the next few months, so if you're still receiving tapes, you should have received a letter asking you to contact our listeners' representative, Diane de Jersey, to find out more about how to switch to memory sticks. If you've not yet done so, please could you contact her. Diane can be contacted on 020 8805 6578. That's 020 8805 6578. And Diane's your listener's representative and will be pleased to help you. And now Ali will read the first item of local news.
Council officers have been criticised as crucial youth services face closure in Enfield due to budget cuts, with staff being told they should expect redundancy, although the decision has not been confirmed. Facilities provided by the Youth Development Support Unit, better known as the Enfield Youth Service, look certain to be shut down due to Enfield Council needing to save £1.7 million. Among the services which look set to be cut are after-school clubs for pupils aged 11 and over, life skills courses, and education, training and employment services, ETE, which offer advice on putting together CVs and interview techniques. While youth centres are expected to remain open, many across the borough will be affected, including the Alan Pullinger Centre in Southgate, Ponders End Youth Centre, Unity Hub at Craig Park, and Croyland Youth Centre. Statutory services such as rehabilitation of young offenders will be protected from the cuts. Members of staff at the youth service are contractually forbidden from speaking publicly, but some have spoken anonymously about their shock at being told on February the 8th that they are to lose their jobs. One person told the Enfield Independent, "It feels horrid. A lot of people are very upset. They care very deeply about their work." There was no indication at all before last Monday. We were told there would be some cuts, but we carried on as normal. We thought we would have to tighten our belts, skimp on photocopying a bit, but nothing like this. Another whistleblower, who had worked for the youth service for over 30 years, said, "Nothing is more important for young people in this borough than these services. It is a travesty." Terry Neville, leader of the Conservatives in Enfield, said the possible closures had been brought about by a lack of forethought. He said, "We all know reductions have to be made and where your priorities are. With better planning and better understanding, we would have seen less harsh reductions. When asked about the cuts, Enfield Council leader Doug Taylor said he sympathised with workers, but central government pressures had left them with no choice. He said, "We have had funding cut by millions of pounds. If we didn't have to make any cuts, then people would say we have previously been very inefficient. No youth centres are planned to close, and this is going to go before the council for vote."
Cycle champions have applauded the council for its bold decision to plough ahead with plans for Cycle Enfield, despite continued vocal opposition. At a meeting of Enfield Council's cabinet last week, the decision-making body gave the formal go-ahead to plans to transform green lanes into a cycling haven with partially segregated cycle lanes and improved junction layout along the road from the North Circular to Enfield Town. An initial consultation carried out by the council last year revealed a slim majority of those who responded were in favour of the scheme. However, since the proposals were first floated more than a year ago, there has been opposition from Save Our Green Lanes, a group of traders and business owners vehemently opposed to the plans. One of their leaders, Helen Osman, told this paper they would be seeking a judicial review of the decision based on how the council carried out the public consultation. "We have been told we have good grounds for legal action on the fact that the consultation process was flawed," she said. She said the group would be funding the review with the donations already received from supporters. However, cycling campaigner Andrew Larson, 37, of Cranford Avenue, Palmer's Green, thinks that the opposition from businesses is down to, open quotes, "a small business's mindset that doesn't like change," close quotes. "To oppose this is backward-looking," he said. "In Enfield, air pollution is getting worse, congestion is getting worse. We can't go on with the way things are or everything will get worse. This is a bold decision for the future of the borough. I think it is great news and it shows the council is thinking about all our futures."
Hospital chiefs have defended themselves against accusations from an MP that there is a growing crisis in emergency care in the borough. Kate Ossamore, the Labour MP for Edmonton and the Junior Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities, spoke out in Parliament over an incident last year when a patient died in accident and emergency. In a question to Health Minister Alistair Burt, she referred to a report which suggested that the patient's death was a result of a failing A&E department, asking, "Can the Minister tell me how the government are urgently going to tackle safety of care at North Middlesex Hospital following revelations that a patient died in December 2015 after being forced to wait an unacceptable amount of time in A&E?" The response from the Minister acknowledged that work had to be done to improve the quality of care in A&E across the country. A spokesman from North Middlesex University Hospital in Stirling Way, Edmonton, said that the death of the patient in December was under investigation, and a full report into the circumstances surrounding the death will be published in March. Mr. Burt added that since July 2015, only 66% of patients have been seen within the government target of treating most patients within 4 hours of their arrival at hospital. The hospital spokesman chalked this up to the fact that the A&E department is short of staff, as it is 5 consultants down, with only 9 of 14 senior emergency medicine posts filled. In the run-up to the closure of the accident and emergency department at Chase Farm Hospital in the Ridgeway, Enfield, in 2013, patient groups warned of the dangers of putting more strain on North Middlesex, which now has the only A&E department in the borough. Miss Ossamore said, "I was determined to ask a question on North Middlesex Hospital, following revelations in a report produced by Haringey CCG that a patient had died at the hospital as a result of waiting too long in A&E. The situation at North Middlesex A&E is an urgent one, which must drastically improve. The department is of central importance to the area, particularly following the closure of Chase Farm A&E and comparatively low level of access to GP, primary care services in comparison to other areas nationally. I will continue to press the government on this matter." She is not the first MP from the borough to speak out about waiting times at the hospital. In 2014, David Burrows, Conservative MP for Enfield Southgate, talked of his ordeal after waiting for 12 hours on a trolley with a ruptured appendix before he was taken for tests. The spokesman from North Middlesex added, Patient safety is always our number one priority. We're working hard to address the challenges we currently face in our A&E department, which is one of the busiest in London. We've been open and honest about the issues and have been working closely with other NHS organisations, local partners and patient representatives to make significant improvements since concerns were first identified last year.
The victim of a fatal traffic collision has been named. Rodney Lewis, aged 84, of Enfield, died after he was involved in a collision on the eastbound side of the A406 North Circular Road at the junction of Colney Hatch Lane at around 10:40 a.m. on Wednesday, February the 3rd. Police believe Mr. Lewis had been driving a Hyundai when he stopped to help the driver of a broken-down black Ford Fiesta, which had stopped. A third car, a black Volkswagen Passat, collided with the Hyundai, which then collided with the Ford Fiesta. Mr. Lewis was pronounced dead at the scene. A 77-year-old woman who was a passenger in the Hyundai was rushed to a North London hospital, where she remains in a serious but stable condition. Police have arrested a 51-year-old woman, the driver of the Passat, on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving and serious injury by dangerous driving. She's been bailed to a date in May. Witnesses are requested to call the Serious Collision Investigation Unit on 020-8991-9555. That's 020-8991-9555.
Junior doctors have received the support of an MP after they went on strike again this week over pay and extended working hours. Doctors striking over new contracts proposed by the government were joined at the picket lines outside Chase Farm by Enfield North MP Joan Ryan. The Labour politician gave her support to the protesters, saying she felt the plans being put forward by the Department of Health were outrageous. Ms Ryan said, "It's clearer than ever you have the public support. It suggested the NHS runs a 7-day service with no extra doctors or pay. Everyone can work out what that means. We already have a health crisis in Enfield, with the A&E department closed at Chase Farm and the others not coming up to standard. Stretching our junior doctors even further will only make things worse." The strikes took place after talks between government officials and the British Medical Association broke down. Dr Holly Greer, who works in mental health at Chase Farm, said they had been left with no choice but to strike over proposals to alter safeguards preventing doctors working unsafe numbers of hours and unfair levels of pay. She said, "The BMA have always pushed for renegotiations, but now the government are threatening to push this contract onto us in a few months' time. It is very difficult to come to the negotiation table with a gun to our heads. We put our heart and soul into the NHS, but having to work with this is incredibly stressful. We're being pushed to breaking point."
A thug who carried out an unprovoked attack on a 75-year-old man at an Edmonton bus stop is being hunted by police. The victim is recovering in hospital with head and facial injuries following the assault on Thursday evening at 9:20 p.m. His condition is described as stable. He had been waiting at the Angel Corner bus stop in 4th Street. The suspect, who appeared to be acting in an erratic manner and engaging with other people waiting at the stop, then approached the man and knocked him to the ground before running off. The suspect is believed to be aged about 25 and is about 6 feet 6 inches tall, with a slim build and dark hair, and was wearing a black jacket and blue jeans. Anyone with information is being asked to call Enfield CID on 020 8345 3311. That's 020 8345 3311, or via the non-emergency number 101. Alternatively, Crime Stoppers can be contacted anonymously on 0800 555 111. That's 0800 555 111.
The building, which houses Enfield Magistrates Court, will close next year. The decision has been announced by the government's Courts and Tribunal Service as a cost-cutting measure which will see the closure of 86 of the 460 courts in England and Wales. The closures are predicted to save £27 million. It cost £340,000 to run the court in Lordship Lane, Tottenham last year, said a government report. It said the court was used to just 22% of its capacity. The building will shut between April and June next year, and hearings will be transferred to Highbury Corner Magistrates Court in Islington. One barrister who responded to the consultation said, "Highbury is run like a factory of overloaded lists. I can only see that getting worse if you shut Tottenham." The closure was opposed by 7 of the 10 consultation respondents, with 2 in favour. Among alternative suggestions were moving the court to Enfield Civic Centre in Silver Street, the Dugdale Centre in London Road, Enfield Town, or Edmonton County Court in 4 Street. In its response to the consultation, the Courts and Tribunal Service said it had considered the travel times users will experience, particularly those attending court from the London boroughs of Ponders End and Edmonton, for council tax hearings. However, the times were not deemed excessive. The service also said, it is further noted, that although significant numbers of council tax summonses are issued each month, a large proportion result in an out-of-court settlement, and less than 1% over a 10-month period for this year resulted in an adjournment. Alternative ways of conducting business for people who would find it difficult to travel to a court elsewhere would be considered. The report added, it is noted that users attending Tottenham Magistrates Court are drawn from some of the most deprived and vulnerable sections of the community. It is acknowledged and accepted that some people will need to travel further to reach their nearest court, and for some the journey, if made by public transport, may be over an hour. For the majority of people, the closure will have little impact. We are mindful of the infrequency with which people need to attend court, and the small proportion of people who would use public transport to reach court. The government's Justice Minister, Shailesh Vara, said, "The decision to close the court is never taken lightly. But in the digital age, I'm confident we have measures in place to ensure access to justice is not diminished."
A man has been sentenced to life imprisonment after being found guilty of stabbing his housemate to death over his secret relationship with a previous girlfriend. Bernardus Petrakis, aged 23, of Shrewsbury Road, Bounds Green, will serve at least 22 years after being convicted of stabbing Mantes Organas, aged 35, who lived at the same address, at the Old Bailey on Monday. After discovering on August the 30th that his housemate had been in a relationship with his ex-partner, Eliana Podolznaya, the Lithuanian national stabbed Mr. Organas several times with a kitchen knife. He fled the property after the attack, but was quickly found and brought back to be charged with murder. Detective Chief Inspector Jamie Piscopo from the Met's Homicide and Major Crime Command Unit said Bernardus Petrakis killed his housemate Mantes Organas in a fit of rage after being informed that his former partner was in a relationship with the victim. Mr. Organas had been sleeping in his room and had no opportunity to defend himself against Petrakis. Mr. Organas was a husband and a father. The vicious attack inflicted upon him by Petrakis has devastated his family and has deprived his child of her loving father. On the night of the murder, Petrakis had confronted Miss Podolznaya and demanded to know if she had started a relationship with Mr. Organas, who was asleep in his room. She admitted that they were together, and Petrakis walked back through the front door and locked her out on the street. She could see through the glass of the front door as Petrakis entered the kitchen, opened the knife drawer, and walked into Mr. Organas' bedroom, which was on the ground floor. When Petrakis eventually allowed Miss Podolznaya back into the property, she discovered that Mr. Organas had been stabbed in the chest and back multiple times. He collapsed on his bed and died from his injuries before reaching hospital.
Campaigners have spoken out about their road safety concerns in Enfield after a pedestrian died in a collision on the busy A10 Great Cambridge Road in Bush Hill Park. The man, who has not yet been named by police, died after he was involved in a collision with a lorry on the southbound carriageway near the junction with Trinity Avenue at about 2:45 p.m. on Wednesday last week. The air ambulance was called out and landed at the playing field beside the A10. The man, who was thought to be 59, was treated by paramedics and an ambulance crew, but died at the scene. An ambulance service spokeswoman said, "Sadly, despite extensive efforts by medics at the scene to save him, a man was pronounced dead by the doctor from the air ambulance. The lorry driver stopped at the scene and is helping police with their inquiries. No arrests have been made." Rosemary Memmott from the Save Bullsmore Lane campaign thought barriers could make the road safer. A 68-year-old pedestrian died in a collision on the road in December. "One death is too many," she said. "If we could just get a road that's just for industrial traffic, it would get it away from schools and pedestrians." Her group is calling for a road to divert M25-bound lorries from Bullsmore Lane. Alison Pang from the Safer Crossing Action Group, which wants improvements at the crossroads at Parsonage Lane and Baker Street in Enfield Town, said she knew the road well. "I used to cross it to go to Edmonton County School," she said. "A friend of mine had a broken leg after an accident there." She said it would be difficult to include more safety measures, as the road is such a direct route to central London. However, she added, "I don't think there are enough speed cameras along the A10. Detectives from the Serious Collision Investigation Unit at Chadwell Heath are investigating and want to hear from witnesses who may not have contacted them. Witnesses should contact the Roads and Transport Policing Command on 020 8597 4874. That's 020 8597 4874. Or Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. That's 0800 555 111.
The head of one of the borough's leading hospitals has denied claims he called for the imposition of a new contract on junior doctors. David Sloman, Chief Executive of the Royal Free London NHS Trust, which runs Chase Farm Hospital in Enfield, was included on a list of signatories in a letter to Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt. The letter said they felt any continuation of a dispute over pay and working hours for junior doctors would be harmful to service continuity with adverse consequences to patients. The letter, written by another NHS Chief Executive, Sir David Dalton, also called on the government to do whatever it deems necessary to end uncertainty for the service and make sure a new contract is in place. But Mr. Sloman has said that he did not support the call for forcing the contracts on the doctors. Jeremy Hunt announced last week that a new contract will be imposed on junior doctors later this year. Mr. Sloman said in an official statement, "I am profoundly disappointed that the national negotiations have failed to reach an agreement with the BMA on a new contract for doctors in training. I have the utmost respect for junior doctors and know how hard they work to deliver patient care and want to enjoy working with them for many years to come. I do believe that the contract offered is reasonable. However, I do not support contract imposition. My view is that the best way to reach resolution is negotiation." Junior doctors at Chase Farm Hospital went on strike last week to oppose the government's stance over the new contracts.
An MP has pledged to do all he can to help a grieving Winchmore Hill family launch a campaign to alert people to the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning. David Burrows, the MP for Enfield Southgate, is the constituency MP of Mark and Chrissy Dingley, whose daughter Francesca died from carbon monoxide poisoning just weeks after arriving in the Chengdu province of China to teach English to school children in February last year. Last week this paper reported on the launch of their campaign, set up in the wake of their daughter's death, to make people travelling abroad aware of the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning. The MP, whose eldest daughter went to the same primary school and secondary school as Francesca, has taken a personal interest in the campaign and is embarking on an extensive lobbying exercise in a bid to get the government to change the advice to travellers, as well as changing regulations around the level of care organisations that employ British young people abroad must provide. Francesca of Hadley Way, who was 22 and is a former pupil of Dame Alice Owen's school in Potters Bar, was working for an English first language school at the time of her death. The school she was employed by was not directly run by the company, but rather its Chinese franchise, and when school managers checked the accommodation they were providing for their employees, the inquest into the tragedy established they'd only carried out a cursory check and had not ensured all appliances in the flat were safe. Mr. Burrows said, "My oldest daughter is studying primary school teaching at the moment, and as part of her studies, she'll be spending a year abroad. I want to make sure that young people like Francesca, like my daughter, are not put at risk by the companies who use their talents and goodwill. That means getting the government to take action on this, because as well as encouraging people to bring portable carbon monoxide detectors with them when they travel, we need to know that companies meet the same safety requirements that they would have to in this country. Mr Burrows' approach to getting the government to take action on this issue will include setting up a meeting between the Dingley family and a representative from the Foreign Office. He will then approach the all-party parliamentary group on carbon monoxide poisoning and ask them to hear evidence from Francesca's parents. Ultimately, he hopes to tackle a debate on the issue in the House of Commons.
People are being encouraged to make sure they're registered to vote with less than 100 days until Londoners go to the polls to elect the next mayor. The London mayoral and Greater London Assembly elections will take place on May the 5th, and the people of Enfield are being urged to ensure that they get on the register as soon as possible. Enfield Council Chief Executive Rob Leake said, "At each election we have to turn people away at the polling stations because they're not on our registration lists. These lists are updated every year for every election. I urge everybody who is eligible to make sure that they do not lose their vote because they're not on the electoral roll. In order to vote, you must be aged 18 or over on polling day, live in London, and be on the electoral register." The government changed the registration process in June 2014 so that each person must register individually rather than one householder listing all eligible people living at the same address.